Bonjour, hello everyone. I'm Nata, host of the Nata PR School podcast. You're a successful entrepreneur or marketing manager and you're about to launch a new product or service, or you've been selling your goods for quite some time, but you want to learn how to increase your visibility, get known, and reach more clients? At Nata PR, we deal with real clients every day and we'll teach you simple, fun, and honest PR solutions. You'll learn easy steps to combine PR to social media right now. Keep listening and let's get started. Bonjour, hello, and welcome to this 62nd episode of the Nata PR School podcast. Our newspaper disappearing. Our newspaper really about to disappear. Have you read a print version of a newspaper recently? I've been talking about these huge newspapers sometimes that still exist. Personally, I rarely read the print version. I usually read the online versions now, especially on my iPad, but I still have a few paper subscriptions, especially those that still exist. And for example, we still subscribe to a very specific, very specialized newspaper called Les Affaires. It's a business newspaper. I can, of course, consult it online, but I love to support these newspapers as long as they print a version. We will support them for sure. I should say that not so long ago, a few months ago, we made the front page, as we say. So one of our clients had this amazing luck to be featured on the cover, the first page of this amazing newspaper. They are really smart on their printed and even online version, actually. They decided to really attract the attention with this color version of their front page, and they have these crazy concepts. So one of our clients that is in the spirit world, they created this amazing company, and the two partners, so my two clients, you could see them diving in a huge cocktail. So it's really fun and interesting. It really attracts the attention, as you can imagine. So the impact of this cover, printed one especially, was huge, and it's still, this is where I'm going. So the printed newspaper version is still very impactful. We also receive an English language newspaper, more local, let's say, that's called the Gazette. We receive it at the office, and I love to browse this newspaper headlines. I can also consult the online version, but I love to go flip through the pages. This is really a newspaper that targets the English-speaking community in Quebec. And it's interesting to see and to read why, because then you understand, or I love to see if there are some different interests from this community and see if their issues are different from the ones that the French-speaking community encounters. It really gives me a better sense of what's important for this community out there. I must admit, I enjoy flipping through the paper, the printed newspaper. Although, of course, I do appreciate how easy it is now to consult any online newspaper. And of course, I'm really happy about all the trees we're saving now. So it has a huge impact not to print as many newspapers, of course, on the environment. But something is really interesting. I don't know if you've noticed that the content that I read online doesn't stick in my mind in the same way. There's something, I would say, almost architectural about print versions, because I can really remember where I saw an article, on what page was it, on the right, on the left, bottom, center. This is really interesting to me. So there's something more, let's say, spatial, like in space. There's an aspect that really disappears to me completely when I read an article on a computer or an iPad. There's no point trying to remember for me where I read something. I can't. I don't know why my brain doesn't remember the information the same way when I read something that's printed. And it's really interesting to see that. Well, we must say too that we are now bombarded by so much information, especially now that we can read online. I consult way more newspaper than I used to read before, and I flip through many publications. Plus, I'm online, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And I see so many websites that do give sometimes resume of information. So it's really hard for me to remember where I saw something. So why are newspapers in any form, printed or online, still important today? Yes, so although we have access to so much information, especially, 24 hours, this is what I say now, bad news, if it lasts 24 hours, sometimes that's how much time it's going to last, unless it's something really like COVID, obviously. But a bad news, really, normally it's 24 hours and then it's gone and disappeared. So newspaper continue to provide us with so important information through in-depth reports, first of all, written by these independent journalists. If you think about it, how important it is. I still read newspaper for the relevant information I find in them. Why? Because this is where I will find sometimes detailed investigations that took weeks, months, and sometimes years to some journalists that they're following, let's say, a certain team, a certain company, or, this is where we learn so much, and it's so important for our societies. This is where we also find stories that reflect our world, our community. This is where you learn about how a country works. If you still read a local newspaper, it's going to give you information. This is why local newspapers are important, because they're the only one with radio and local TV, of course, to talk about what's happening in smaller communities. It's also super important for culture, if you think about it, right? And newspaper, they're the ones who put the spotlight on these issues affecting our world and our environment. This is why they are so important. This is also where you will find what the public feels about certain specific issues, political or any other specific issues that they are interested in. So this is where you will learn how the public feels. You will also find there the current trends. I tell my students, start reading one newspaper for at least a month, and then you'll have a good sense of what are the themes, what are the trends, the opinions. It helps you also, if you want to promote something, to understand how people think, what they're looking for. And the most important of all is really, newspaper to me represent freedom of expression. Many countries don't have that, are about to lose it. So it's important to remember that thanks to these newspapers and these journalists, we have this expression where people can read and talk and find out about what really is happening. Is it a difficult time for newspapers? Of course it is. Although, as you know, most major daily newspapers shifted to digital format already now, several years ago for many of them. So finding a balance in terms of revenue is still extremely difficult. And I found some information in La Tribu, but this is from a very interesting woman. She's a teacher. She was for many years vice president of the Wall Street Journal and New York Times. This is what she has to say. Her name is Penelope Abernathy. If you want to find her, Penelope Abernathy. This is what she says, because she's really interested by smaller communities who many of them lost their local newspapers in beginning of 2000. So this is what she says. Even in the smallest markets, Facebook and Google siphon 3/4 of the digital revenue. That's 75% of publicity revenues. And so this 25% that's left that's a fight that all the other media have, not just the newspaper, the magazines, the local TV, radio. So that leaves all other media fighting for digital scraps, as she says. Although, thank God, the New York Times was able to hold up and create this online version, and they were able also to exceed their online revenue that exceeded the print for the first time during the pandemic. I guess also the pandemic really shed a light on what we consume and where we consume information and where we can find true information too. That's not just something that let's say, I have nothing against influencers, but they're not independent journalists sometimes. So it's very different when a journalist is, because they have this, it's a profession. They can't just lie. For some of them did, and they paid a high price. So anyway, all this to say that I believe in newspaper and how important they are. So to survive, of course, some smaller publications will probably become rarer and more expensive, and they probably will, like my journal, my newspaper that I told you at the beginning of this podcast, Les Affaires, be very niche and target a very specific audience. And this is what she says too. She believes that print will survive in some form because it's very similar to the books, printed books. Even if people read a news book on their on any specific device, the paper book is still there. It has still survived, and I believe in that too. Also because of what I told you, our brain doesn't function the same way when we read something printed. And she believes that there's a future for subscriptions to major newspaper a few weeks a day. I'm not sure about that. We'll see in 10 years. I think like some new major newspaper will only be online eventually, but we'll see. And she says that we will, the era of the print daily will be remembered fondly. The whole notions was capturing the history of the last 24 hours. Yeah, it was another way of life, let's say. So I found this on a French website, but of course you can find tons of information about what she says and her researches online. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode and that this, let's say, public relations marketing little pause, little break is helping you think about your marketing plan and keep some money, my friend, from your budget. If you are part of these people, and I do, even myself, I spend money online, but I do keep money for printed, and let's just subscribe to those newspaper, the printed one that are still available to you. And make sure if you are advertising that you save money to keep these people and these media alive. So hopefully you found this episode interesting and you know where to find me. If you want to keep the conversation with me, I'll be happy to schedule a meeting with you and find out about what's happening in your company. So I hope to see you la semaine prochaine. See you next week. Hey, you want to learn more about how to implement PR strategies? Head on to natapr.com and get on our list. You will also receive the Nata PR model on how to create a successful PR campaign. If you want to become a client, just send us an email to nata@natapr.com. Talk to you next week. À la semaine prochaine.